Tiger. Tiger. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. And this video is brought to you by Tiger the Cat and Ms. Burns. So, we are on our last unit. So we're talking about decolonization, globalization, and nationalism this week through next week. Then I'm going to introduce you your final project because I want to give you some time to do it. So what I really do like about this last unit is it does cover a lot, but it definitely connects with a lot of the issues that we see going on in the current day. So there's a nice connection and a real purpose to it all. So we are going to be bouncing around a few different areas. This very short week will be just really centered on the Middle East, and the next week we're going to talk about Africa and India. Right, so if you ever heard people like Nelson Mandela and Gandhi, maybe some of you did that for your interview assignment that you did prior to the Memorial Day break. That's why why you looked up some of those people, is because we're going to be talking about them soon. So, Israel. Okay, I don't know how much you necessarily know about Israel, right? We know this is the area that actually to the three monotheistic faiths. So not just Judaism, where Israel, the land of Israel, is important, but this area, also known as the Holy Land, right, was also important to Christians and to Muslims. Okay, it sits on the southeastern corner of the Mediterranean Sea, right? So if this is Egypt, right, we got Africa over here, right? If we were to look north of here, right, we'd be looking at the continent of Europe and Italy. Right, so geographically speaking, this is where we are. They also have many other countries surrounding it, like Jordan and Syria. I don't know how much you've been paying attention, but in news in general, Syria's gone through a lot of many issues, revolution, and things of that nature. Okay? So, why was Israel created? Okay? There's a few things. All right. Number one, Jews have always been a group of people that have been targeted. Right. Ever since ancient times, Jewish people have had to migrate to other places because they were disliked by maybe the majority group in a given place. Right. They were blamed for the bubonic plague, and they were forced to move to different areas away from the rest of Christian Europe. And so we have this long history of anti-Semitism, okay? So even before the Holocaust happened, right, before World War II, right, before 1930s, 1940s, there was actually already a movement called Zionism, okay? So Zionism is the nationalist movement for Jews, and they just wanted a homeland somewhere, a Jewish state somewhere. Now, it was never defined as Israel. I'm sure that's, what they maybe had in mind, but they wanted a homeland somewhere because they felt like they as a community have always been kind of shunned by other groups. A lot of people also start to migrate to the land of Israel, especially after the Holocaust. Even when the Holocaust was over, people who had survived, they maybe try to go back to their homes, let's say in Poland, but anti-Semitism did not end because of the Holocaust. Okay, people still felt very anti-Jewish. Not all, but some. And the people just had bad memories, They wanted to start a new life for themselves. So people naturally started migrating to the area of Israel after the Holocaust. And then officially, once we had the creation of the United Nations, there was political involvement where a very powerful organization actually stepped in and divided this land. Because the thing is that we can take into account, well, okay, Jewish people start moving to Israel. Okay, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you had other people already living there, okay, known as Palestinians. All right, so imagine, and this is the example I always like to give, imagine if You have been living in your home, your apartment, right? And you've been living there, your parents have been living there, maybe even your grandparents lived in the same home. But then someone comes in and says, well, my family used to live there 100 years ago, so I therefore claim the right to your home. It would kind of upset you, right? Especially if the government or someone stepped in and said, we're going to force you out of your home, right? Because these other people, they used to live here, hundreds of years ago. So this is kind of the issue that's been going on for a very long time in the Middle East. And that's why if you ever heard that phrase, peace in the Middle East, it's one of those things that we struggle with, and this is the start of that reason. So as a result of Jews moving to Israel, people who were living there, the Palestinians, became refugees, right? Meaning that they were forced to leave their homes, right, and their way of life, and move to other places with, around the borders or in, designated areas. When the Jews moved in, they did set up a community for themselves right away. They set up businesses and farms, these community farms, right, as a way to sustain themselves. It led to a lot of civil war and fighting between the Israelis and Palestinians, and sometimes that conflict spilled into those neighboring areas I showed you earlier. So whether it be Lebanon or Jordan or Syria, other areas were being affected by the crisis going on in Israel and Palestine. Okay. Now, why we call it the Arab-Israeli conflict, not to confuse you guys, if we're talking about Palestinians, right, who are primarily, they're Muslim, right? Arab is like their ethnicity, right? Muslim would be like a religion, right? So just kind of define the difference there. So fighting started as early as 1956. You had different groups, such as Yasser Arafat and the PLO, led fighting against Israel, and you had these other very aggressive groups like Hamas, who are also attacking the Israelis. And to this day, like, there's still a lot of hatred between the groups and a lot of fighting that still exists today. Some people say that the best way to solve all this is to create a roadmap for peace. Basically say, listen, just create two separate states of equal size, and maybe that'll solve our problem. Because really, the whole reason why they're fighting is a dispute over territory, right? So if you look at over the years, what has happened? Okay, the green represents the land controlled by the Palestinians. The white little parcels that you see is land controlled by the Jews. So in 1946, right, just as immediately after World War II and the Holocaust, Palestinians still controlled most of it, what we know as the Holy Land or Land of Israel. But if you look over the years, most of it has become white, right? So if we look at nowadays, the Israelis or the Jews control most of the land in this region, and the Palestinians are in those green little spots, right? So they have become refugees. They've either gone out to bordering countries, or they live in these separate little areas, like Gaza. That's Gaza, if you ever heard like the Gaza Strip. Okay. Other things going in the Middle East that you need to know. We've also had human rights abuses happen post-World War II, right? So, like, the Holocaust was not going to be the last genocide, right? When we talked about the Cold War, we talked about how Cambodia and Pol Pot, right, and how he committed a genocide against his own people. Next week, we're going to learn about the Rwandan genocide, which is a shame because if we were in school, I'd be showing you guys the movie Hotel Rwanda. But if you have access, I'm not sure if it's on Netflix. I have to double check. I know it's definitely on YouTube. Hotel Rwanda. Although they make the guy in the movie look like kind of a hero, but it does do a pretty good job at showing the horrors of that genocide and why that genocide took place. So it's a pretty good movie. I would definitely recommend it if you have access to it. Anyway, getting back to what we're talking about, the Middle East. So there's this one group called the Kurds, where I talk about human rights abuses. So you have this ethnic group called the Kurds, and again, they have their own way of life, their own set of beliefs, and this ethnic group lived in different areas within the Middle East, specifically countries like Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. Now, over the years, their homeland was divided, and depending on who was in power, people like Saddam Hussein, who was a dictator in Iraq that was killed, they did not treat the Kurdish people very well. Okay, they destroyed their homes, killed them, they were forced to relocate, right? So this group was specifically attacked because they did not fit in with the ideologies of people who are leading these countries, right? The majority groups in those countries, they were a minority group. Over the years, some countries have done things to protect the Kurds or change their policies. Like in Turkey, they've allowed them to actually like speak their own language if you're like Kurdish or you're living in Turkey, and or set up their own like government, right? So they have done things to protect these people. And the last bit I wanted to talk to you is Islamic fundamentalism. So Islamic fundamentalism is Islamic extremism, all right? It's basically believing that you think that your government should be based on the literal rules of Islam. So these countries are very theocratic, or they believe in a government that merges religion, right, or includes religion, right? America is not like that, right? We keep religion and government separate, right? The separation of church and state. These countries, they don't believe that. Islamic fundamentalism is happening in a few areas in the Middle East, places like Iran and Afghanistan. One of the videos you'll watch, it's also taking place in Syria. If you look at groups like ISIS, we could consider them Islamic fundamentalists or extremists. This is not the majority of people, okay? I just want to make that really clear, that most Muslims are not these extreme fundamentalists. All right, it's just like Christianity. You have people who go to church, you know, for Christmas time and Easter, right? Or maybe they never go to church, but they consider themselves Christians. And then you have people who like follow the Bible literally, right? So it's just, it's a difference. You can't go and look at all people of one faith as acting in the same manners. So a lot of this Islamic fundamentalism came out of reaction against people like Western countries, so countries like America. I mean, we have done things where we've gotten involved a lot in Middle Eastern politics, but in Iran, for example, they had a revolution in which this is what made them, the whole point of this revolution, right? Revolution is to change a government. It's what made them an Islamically fundamentalist country. And to this day, we don't have a great relationship with Iran. We've tried to sit down and discuss, you know, basically trying to disarm nukes, because we have a big fear of the fact that they have nuclear power and they don't like us, and that makes us a little nervous. So this guy here, Ayatollah Khomeini, he's the one who was the first person to lead Iran under this new Islamic fundamentalist regime. And then in Afghanistan, also affected by Islamic fundamentalism, you've ever heard of Osama bin Laden? He was a terrorist that we killed during Obama's administration. That's the place that we're talking about, right? That's who we're talking about there. Now, these places use Sharia law. Sharia law is the law that is outlined in the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, okay? Now, in both these, in any area really where you see Islamic fundamentalism, because it abides by the very strict code of Sharia law, women do not have many rights. Women in the religion of Islam are seen as spiritually equal, but in these countries, they are considered politically inferior. So if you've ever heard of things where women are not allowed to drive, let's say in Saudi Arabia, right, or they are not allowed to be like out in public with their man, these type of rules exist in these type of countries that are Islamically fundamentalist. So, if we look at this question, what are one of the main goals of Islamic fundamentalism? Okay, A, B, C, D. Which one would you choose? Hopefully, letter A. Okay, they want to return to traditional beliefs of Islam. That's the main goal of these types of countries. So, I think the instructions this week are pretty straightforward. Just read along, watch the videos, answer the questions, submit it to me, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Burns out.